The 𝐓𝐡𝐞 Brigades released a video yesterday. So did 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐜, just in time for our show. Kept me busy for the last 24 hours. But let's just start with the first one tomorrow, because we're going to just set the context here. We've been 6 months of this war. 𝐓𝐡𝐞 put out a video the other day here that we're showing you that just shows, if people remember back to all these videos we've shown over the last several months. 𝐓𝐡𝐞 put out a sort of best of here, showing us all the different weapons, tactics that they've used in the war, showing us the incredible bravery, of course, but also the tactical efficacy. We see here tanks being dragged away. And we know that each of these videos represents a much larger operation that we don't see on these videos. These videos are tight crops. I'm sure after the war, we'll see more of the detail of these operations. But in general, the edits are usually very tight, especially on the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 Brigades videos. But the operation that happened on the weekend, we can maybe start with that now tomorrow. Number 4. So they're showing us all the steps of this operation. What we're looking at here is the fighters getting, these are the commanders. We can see some details in this as they're planning this ambush. They called it the ambush of the righteous in the Al-Zana area of Khan Younis in southern Gaza, on the eastern edge of Khan Younis. And we see the fighters here talking, and we're looking at images of this, and you can see the tablet in front of the map that they're working on there, showing an aerial drone footage of the area. And these fighters are planning this detailed ambush. You can see the phone beside them, suggesting that this is a tunnel operation, that this is being planned inside the tunnel. So the second time around, he says the infantry force will return to here. He's pointing out all of these directions. He's pointing to the setting of the ambush. He's talking about 2 shooters meeting at this particular point. And then the interesting part about this, I mean, there's many interesting parts about this, but these fighters clearly have intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance to such a degree here that they're predicting the troop movements of the IDF after this attack, after the initial ambush. And they're talking to each other about where to set each of these devices, because it's a multi-layered ambush that involves shooters. It involves soldiers then fleeing to what they believe is a safe house. And then these commanders here are talking about setting up devices to booby trap the safe house, picking the particular devices here. They're talking in detail about which devices to use. We know we've talked for several months about the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 Brigades' use of the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 explosively formed penetrators. This is a series of weapons that are used against tanks and armored vehicles, but also have anti-personnel versions of these weapons. And so they're detailing exactly where to put each of these devices in this complex ambush, based on the movements of the troops. And so I'll give you, just on the next time through, I'll give you the dialogue, because the dialogue is remarkable. And again, this operation happened on Saturday. So he says the infantry force will return after they finish their work, saying that they'll go back home to the tunnel safely. This is not a martyrdom operation. He's saying here, set up the anti-personnel devices here, set up the anti-armor devices here. And then he says the armored vehicles will come to rescue the soldiers, and they'll come from this location, from the artillery position. So they're pointing out at this point now, 4 months into the operation, into the war on Khan Younis, they have surveillance and reconnaissance and intelligence enough to be able to dictate what position will move from the border, which they're calling the artillery position. The tanks are on the border in the buffer zone, shelling into the cities, and that's this ruining Khan Younis, destroying Khan Younis in the way that Nora ably covered, as usual, in the news report at the beginning of this show. Khan Younis is just absolutely devastated. And so those artillery positions that they're referring to here are those tanks on the border. So they're able to, 𝐤𝐿 told Al Jazeera Arabic that this was a 50-day operation in planning, something that we've talked about on this show for many months now. The longer the Israelis are in these areas in Gaza, the more likely these large-scale attacks are able to be planned in this kind of detail. And so you see that the fighter's here talking, and he says, let's review the troop leading procedures, which is a military term for preparing your unit for a mission. Which is an interesting little tidbit in this, because we know that Yoav Gallant, the Israeli defense minister, said that Hamas is no longer functioning as a military organization. Just that little detail in this shows us that these aren't the people taking part in the operation. These are the commanders setting the operation, and then they will give that operation to their units to execute them in a functioning military organization, which we've been monitoring here on the show for this entire war, because there's two stages of the 𝐤𝐿 brigades. There's the national army of the 𝐤𝐿 brigades, but if the national army were to be dismantled as Israel promised, they would move into fighting as a guerrilla organization, and we've been watching closely for that as a sign of tracking the war. And we've never seen any detail that suggests that they're dismantled in any way as a military organization in any of the areas that Israel has been fighting in throughout this war. And this battle in Khan Younis started in the beginning of December. So this is a 4 full month battle here. And you're seeing on video evidence of the 𝐤𝐿 brigades operating as a military organization. You can see that they clearly have they're able to get the intelligence from that. You can see the tablet there with the drone footage of that. So they're able to carry out these kind of sophisticated operations that require precision, accuracy, and acumen, because they have because they're continuing to function as a military organization. Despite the brutality brought down, just the appalling crimes brought down on the civilians of Gaza, we haven't seen any evidence of any kind of even marginal military successes from Israel. So this operation is on Saturday, the day before the Israelis left Khan Younis. And this video will give you a real sense of why it is that the Israelis left Khan Younis. And again, so 𝐤𝐿 told us about this operation on Saturday. They noted that it was the 27th day of Ramadan, which is Laylat al-Qadr, which is a night of power. It's one of the holiest days on the Muslim calendar. We can see the fighter here holding the miswak, which is a dental health branch that the Prophet used. And so they're really in this video tapping into the fighting tradition and to Ramadan, and are able to, because of that date, indicating that they're able to pick the date to execute this operation. These are not happening. And as I said, this is a 50-day operation in planning, and then they're able to execute it on this very meaningful day, very significant day on the Muslim calendar. They're able to execute this operation, which this video has a number. The core of the video is related to Laylat al-Qadr, and that's actually been unique in 𝐤𝐿's videos. They haven't focused on the religious elements in their videos much at all, and so this was an interesting video to see that, because they of course are tying it into a long history of struggle. And are also suggesting they're able to pick the days in a way that's really remarkable. Again, you can see the phone lines for the internal communication system that Israel hasn't been able to get at, that connects to the tunnel apparatus. And one interesting element of this video is that this is clearly a tunnel operation. It's able to be taken place because of the tunnel networks, but that shows up almost not at all in this video by 𝐤𝐿. The tunnel network is considered to be just part of the military project. They're not trying to highlight or show off that element of it, which we'll see later from the Israeli perspective was one of the singular reasons for the success of the operation. So just interesting to note that. And we'll go to number 5 when these guys finish here tomorrow. And now we see them outside. This is all the same video. I cut it up for you here to show you. So after briefing their units, the fighters, we see them here moving through. And if you look at the landscape, you can see it's just scorched earth, completely demolished. Israel believes that they hold this area completely. They identified that it was on a logistics supply route, which indicates to the Israelis that they believe it's a safe road, that after all of this time, these many months of fighting in Khan Younis, that they believed that this area was safe. And that is one of the reasons why 𝐓𝐡𝐞 was able to carry out this operation, because of the 50-day planning, because of the patience and surveillance. And so we see the fighters here. That first fighter is holding an anti-personnel device, and he's going to place it in a particular aim it at a particular direction, which is what we saw in the planning video. That fighter there is holding a 𝐓𝐻𝐽𝐽. He's going to take it out to the roadside. You can see him go out to the roadside to plan it. That's another anti-personnel device here. The fighter's going here. We're watching him walk through the rubble. Just unbelievable destruction, criminal destruction of the civilian city of Khan Younis here. But we're seeing these fighters out on the road planting particular devices on the road that are different than the devices that they're booby trapping this building with. And then they're aiming the particular devices, which we saw in the planning meeting. They're not just an improvised explosive device that just goes off in a general area. These are anti-personnel devices designed to be aimed. And so the fighters are laying this ambush with such detail that they're aiming these weapons in the place of a predictive move by the Israeli army, that they will flee the initial ambush, and they will flee to this safe house. And they picked which safe house they believed the Israelis would run to. And they wire up that safe house. They wire up the road on the outside with a 𝐓𝐻𝐽𝐽 for the tanks, because, as they said in the planning meeting, there will be a stage where they will come to rescue, the Israelis will come to rescue their soldiers hit in the ambush, and they will come in armored vehicles down this road. In the planning meeting, the general says to place the 𝐓𝐻𝐽𝐽s on the roadside, but he also says we need multiple Yasin shooters to fire RPGs at the tank that's entering from a particular direction. You can see that this is a 4-way intersection, and the Israelis have thousands of troops and dozens of armored vehicles and tanks, scores of them that could respond, but the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 brigades have identified which ones actually will. So you see the fighters wiring these devices in particular, setting the ambush. And this is something that 𝐓𝐡𝐞 hasn't really showed us a lot of. The pre video that we see the video, we don't generally see 𝐓𝐡𝐞 doing this work, the fighters laying the devices ahead of time. And so that's something in this video. This video was an 8-minute long video that people can find on my Twitter after the show if you haven't seen it yet in its entirety. This is, again, I've chopped this up, and also for the censorship reasons that everybody, I think, that watches this show is aware of. We skate a line with these edits to try to keep these videos up, because a lot of the best videos over the course of this war have been taken down through censorship. But the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 brigades have within their fighting units these media operations arms, and having these videos be disseminated and showing the actual battle on the ground is a critical point that we've stressed all throughout this war, of the way that 𝐓𝐡𝐞's media operations work amid the avalanche of lies that the Israelis tell. and the cover up of the military successes of the resistance. These videos have been the antidote to those lies. So significant detail that we're seeing in these operations. So maybe we could go to number 6 tomorrow. So this is the ambush itself. You can see here, this is a unit. 𝐓𝐡𝐞 says this is a unit of 30 soldiers. This is part of the commando brigade of the Israeli army. This is the only indication in the video. That darkness right there is the only indication that this is a tunnel operation. But it's actually the key part of this operation is that they're accessing this destroyed building, and you can see the landscape. So Israel believes through its constant aerial surveillance that they have this entire area held. But the fighters are able to come up in a tunnel in a destroyed house, something that we talked about on the 9th of October would happen in a ground operation. So they're able to use the tunnel network to come up inside a demolished house that the Israelis believe is no longer a threat. And you can see in this video, these are the soldiers walking into the ambush, into the booby trap. So 𝐓𝐡𝐞 has hung, we have seen already just in these 3 videos, at least 6 cameras that are hung. And we know cameras, that cameramen are not just on these hung cameras. And 𝐓𝐡𝐞 said there's much more video of this operation. So you can see this unit here, this soldier is carrying flagging markings, which has a red triangle on it. I'm not sure if he intended that to be the case, but we see the fighters coming up through the tunnel here. You see their weaponry, and the 2 shooters are getting in position for the ambush here. We're watching the fighters move into position. Now we're watching video cameras, CCTV camera footage of the Israelis on patrol, walking into the ambush that's set up. And then they flee. We've cut this part out, but there's many soldiers in this operation that we see, many casualties that we see. And then we see the soldiers flee that initial shooting that has just been edited out. And then they're approaching here, the building they believe is the safe house that we watched the fighters rig up the anti-personnel devices in, and then they detonate in that. And the Israelis have said that 4 soldiers were killed in this operation. 𝐓𝐡𝐞 said that there was 10. They're identifying 10 killed in this video. Again, we don't know. The Israeli numbers don't ever add up. It definitely appears very consistently that they are covering up their mass casualty events. But we are seeing the soldiers walk into the ambush here in this video. Again, you can see the scorched earth. Israel has destroyed all the buildings in this area. And these soldiers have probably been walking this route for days as part of a patrol to guard their resupply route, which is the most available target. The resupply is the most available target. Because the soldiers constantly need that resupply. And so the soldiers walk into the Shawaz here, and this goes off, the device goes off in the place. So 𝐓𝐡𝐞 picked the building to be that they knew the Israelis would take shelter in, and then detonate inside that building. So maybe we can skip to number 7 here tomorrow. There's the guy with his flag. Just to skip to number 7 here, we're seeing now we're seeing the rescue, just as 𝐓𝐡𝐞 predicted. The rescue's coming, the tanks racing down the road here, and we see the cameraman facing the barrel of the tank, which is something that we constantly see. And we see a direct hit 𝐓𝐡𝐞 strike from an elevated firing position, hits the turret of the tank, and the tank slowly drifts off the road, which is something we haven't seen before, but it's clear in this video that the tank drifts off to the side of the road after being hit. And then the second, just as 𝐓𝐡𝐞 predicted, the second tank approaches to cover it. And again, you can see in this video an elevated 𝐓𝐡𝐞 strike. So they're using the upper floors of a destroyed building to hit that tank. Israel acknowledged both of those tanks being hit. This is a third one, tank that we're seeing here, hit with the Shawaz device that we saw being planted in the booby trap section of the video. So this is the Yassin 105 strikes. This is, again, just to reiterate, 𝐓𝐡𝐞 built weapon. It's a Soviet clone, but it's something that the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 brigades built themselves in Gaza and have provided all of their fighters throughout the war, despite the fact that there's been 4 months of concentrated attack on Khan Younis. They're still able to bring out all of the weapons that are the most appropriate for the operation. So we see both of those tanks get hit, and then a third tank hit with the Shawaz. That tank that drifted off the road hasn't corrected its position. It's still drifted off the road, suggesting that Yassin strike penetrated the vehicle, which we know also happens. The Israelis acknowledge casualties from their armored units. Now we cut out the main part of the ambush, again, for YouTube reasons. But yeah, so maybe we could go to, just as proof, we could go to number 9 here tomorrow. Number 9 shows us here, we can see up in the top left corner there, a D9 armored bulldozer pulling the wreckage of that tank away from that site. And so just maybe we can go back through each of the videos from 5 to 9 tomorrow, because I just want to, while we do that, I'm going to just tell you what the Israelis said happened in this operation, and people can judge for themselves if the Israelis are telling the truth about these operations. The Israeli internal probe suggested that this is what the IDF reported this. 4 were killed on Saturday when gunmen came out of a tunnel in a destroyed building and opened fire at troops carrying out a patrol along the IDF's logistics route in Khan Younis, according to the initial military probe. The operatives apparently managed to flee back into the tunnel. So again, we're seeing fighters return back to their base. These are not martyrdom. These are not martyrdom missions. If we could skip tomorrow, could we skip to number 6? Because I want to just show you what the Israelis said happened in number 6. The Israelis said the soldiers who tried to pursue the attackers noticed that the escape route was booby-trapped and therefore held back. And it's clear in this video that we're watching that the booby trap went off on the soldiers that fled. So we have the initial ambush, which is a shooting ambush. We see the 2 shooters there. We see the soldiers here approaching the ambush, and we're going to cut out the part where the soldiers fall. But the soldiers are ambushed here. And then the following group of soldiers turns and runs to what they believe is the safe house. You can see the soldiers moving there. They're wounded, and then here they are approaching the safe house. This is the camera on the safe house. You can see them virtually running, as close to running as you can get over that rubble. And then the device is detonated on this troop, which that camera clearly shows. So you can just see by the Israeli detail the lies that we have been trying to filter and trying to find the signal in the noise of all of this propaganda and cover-ups that the Israelis do. But this operation was said by 𝐓𝐡𝐞 on Saturday. They announced it in a field report that this operation happened. And the Israelis acknowledged an operation. They didn't say where. They just said in the south, where 4 soldiers were killed along a logistics route, and that the attackers fled back into the tunnel. But we clearly see here a much more sophisticated operation and a much more costly operation for Israeli forces. Because we'll remember that the reason, so this is Saturday, this operation. By sunup Sunday, the Israelis are gone. And within minutes of that, people are going back to Khan Younis, to their homes, which Nora talked about. People went immediately back to their homes. So people were in their homes, or what's left of their homes. In most cases, their homes didn't exist anymore, but they were back on Sunday, within 24 hours of this operation that we're seeing. Some reports on the area talked about 3 medevac helicopters part of the 1,500 that the Israelis have flown during this operation, removing their troops. And so you can clearly see by this one example, which 𝐤𝐿 has dropped on the most important day of the Muslim calendar, after 6 months of battle, at a time when Israel is saying they've dismantled Hamas as a military organization and are withdrawing from Khan Younis. And on Sunday, people are trying to think of the reasons why the Israelis withdrew from Khan Younis. And what we're seeing in this video is pretty clearly the reason why. The Israelis stayed in Khan Younis for the last operations that Israel carried out before withdrawing from Khan Younis was, of course, the attack on Nasser Hospital. They wanted to dismantle the second largest hospital after Shifa, where the weeks before they were carrying out a brutal raid at Shifa to dismantle it. And we know that they also carried out an operation at Al-Amal, the Red Crescent Hospital, in Khan Younis, where they dismantled the hospital, told everybody they dismantled the hospital, and then bulldozed sand berms around the hospital so that people couldn't enter the hospital. And so in order to stay for those extra 2 weeks to carry out those brutal massacres and dismantling of the healthcare system, the Israelis left themselves in a position that they were subject to this attack by 𝐤𝐿. A very costly attack. And we know from the show last week, I covered the attack on Nasser Hospital, where the Israelis went back into Nasser to dismantle it. And a troop of their special forces, 𝐓𝐴GO's guerrilla warfare unit, was hit by a thermobaric warhead that we covered last week. With 16 casualties in that operation. So the Israelis are losing dozens of soldiers in order to remain in hospitals, in order to remain dismantling hospitals. And the Palestinian resistance is able to, after all of this time, carry out what is, I would say, the most amazing video that we've seen of this war. The complexity, the detail, and then the exact precision, the predictive nature of it to predict which way the Israeli movements were going to come. All of that is remarkable military organization that just clearly puts lie to everything that we read, unfortunately, in the Western and English language media about this war. And it wasn't just this 𝐤𝐿 operation. There was also Saraya al-Quds operations in Khan Younis. So if we could go to 0A here, Tamara. I had to number these weird because these all came out yesterday, right before, as we were planning for this show. And so you see Saraya al-Quds again, Islamic Jihad's armed wing. You see a fighter hooking up an explosively formed penetrator. This video kind of has everything of this war. We see him walking through the walls, which is something that Palestinians have done effectively throughout this war, to move ably through buildings, through mouse holes that they've created, and to fight in the alleys. And here we're looking at a cameraman that's showing an Israeli tank within 1 block. We see the Israeli tank here pulling into the intersection, his barrel pointed directly at the cameraman, something that we repeatedly see pointed at the fighters or at the cameramen. And we're going to watch there. The fighter pops out of the alley, fires his RPG with a tandem 85 warhead, which is a uniquely 𝐤𝐿 creation, to add the second explosive charge to a weapon that wasn't as effective anymore because of the up-armoring of Israeli armored vehicles. And so we're seeing them use a tandem 85 here. He fires that at the Israeli troop position that's in a building behind the tank. The tank is covering the troops in the building. So the fighter pops out of the alley. First of all, the cameraman is just right there in the streets. That's incredible courage. And then you see the fighter pop out of the alley, fire on the troop position, not on the tank. He fires it over the tank and then detonates. That's where we're seeing the device detonated on the tank, a much more impactful weapon to use against the armored vehicle than the RPG. And so the RPG fire is a decoy at the troops, and then the as their attention is taken away, the 𝐄𝐤𝐽 that we're seeing here now, the device is detonated, that was pre-positioned. Again, a predictive operation, assuming where the Israeli troop movements would go, because the Palestinian resistance has intelligence and reconnaissance in all of these areas. We're seeing fighters moving. We're seeing 6 months on, 5 months of ground war. These fighters are skilled fighters. They're battle tested. The drones that Ali and Nora and Anthony talked about at the beginning as battle tested, as machines, doesn't mean anything in comparison to the battle testing of this entire generation now of Gaza militants, who you can see just moving through, firing and getting back into the alleys, which is something that we've seen throughout this war. Palestinians able to use the geography of the Gaza Strip to their advantage, the indigenous population using it to their advantage, and moving through the areas. Again, because of the way that this operation is planned, in between the streets, in between the buildings, that de-emphasizes the ability of the tank's active protection system for the radar to detect the incoming round and counter it. And so the use of the landscape has been a critical part of this battle that I always try to underline and underscore. And of course, the Palestinians do that as well, and note that in their videos consistently, the way that they use this area. When this one finishes tomorrow, we'll go to B, because 𝐓𝐴 𝐤𝐿 video that they released yesterday, 𝐬𝐿 released an 8-minute video, and then 𝐓𝐴 𝐤𝐿 released this double video, and we're seeing the cameraman, and we're seeing a 𝐓𝐴 𝐤𝐿 fighter using a 𝐬𝐿 Brigade's Yasin 105, something that we've noticed, and that's the tank right there. I don't know what that is. If that's 30 feet, maybe seems like a generous amount. If you look at the shadows of the fighters virtually touch the shadow of the tank. The tank is moving through the alley. The fighter moves through the alley to the tank. It's right out in front. You can see there. That's an armored troop carrier, not a tank. That's a Nammer troop carrier that's holding 12 troops. And we see the cameraman get in position as well. 𝐓𝐴 𝐤𝐿 has embedded cameramen in their units as well to show this battle. So this is the ability of both the major resistance factions to carry out the same type, if not more sophisticated than we've seen at any other point in the battle, at a time when the Israelis are attempting to tell people that their withdrawal from Khan Younis was somehow related to their mission and not related to the conditions imposed upon them by the resistance, which is something we see also, of course, in the prisoner exchange negotiations, the ceasefire negotiations, that the resistance is imposing the conditions on those as well. Israel has been unable, after 6 months of genocide, unable to have even the most elementary military successes that they can negotiate from a position of strength of any kind in these negotiations. And the 𝐬𝐿 brigades have stuck to their negotiating positions, added flexibility to the stages of the prisoner release, but in the core principles that people must be able to return home, that the Israeli army must withdraw from Gaza. These are demands that have been made by the resistance since the beginning, that they haven't wavered on. The resistance has wavered on, not wavered, but has allowed space for there to be a multi-layered exchange, so that there doesn't have to be a comprehensive ceasefire agreement made. The resistance has allowed it to be a staged, where it would begin with a ceasefire, but that the prisoner releases would come in stages. So we're seeing that Israel's unable to impose on the battlefield conditions on the resistance, and unable to, because of that, impose them at the negotiating table as well.
Thanks for watching this video. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, hit like, leave a comment, These engagements help us with the YouTube algorithm, and it helps us to get around Silicon Valley censorship as much as possible. It does make a difference. You can also support our journalism by going to electronicintifada.net and clicking on donate now. Thank you.